Do you even know what you're holding? The teller's voice cut through the quiet bank like a sudden alarm, sharp and incredulous. Evelyn Johnson paused mid-step, the worn leather of her purse brushing against her hip as she lifted her folder, fingers gripping it with careful determination. The bank lobby, bathed in pale sunlight filtering through tall glass windows, seemed to freeze, every metallic surface reflecting the tension that had just snapped into place. Customers in line shifted uncomfortably, some dropping a breath they hadn't realized they were holding, others stealing glances at the scene unfolding at the counter. Mark Reynolds, the senior teller, leaned back against the polished oak, a smug grin curling at the edge of his lips, his tie slightly askew as though he had been waiting for this moment all morning. Evelyn's eyes, sharp and unwavering, met his, and for a heartbeat the room felt suspended, every tick of the wall clock stretching into eternity. "These are all valid," she said clearly, her voice calm but carrying an authority that belied her age. "I have verified every line. The procedure you are enforcing is incorrect." A murmur rippled through the nearby patrons, a low buzz of disbelief mixed with curiosity. Mark's grin faltered slightly, replaced by a twitch of irritation, a subtle tightening of the jaw that didn't go unnoticed. "Miss, I don't think you understand the process here," he replied, his tone sharp but laced with doubt, gesturing vaguely at the stacks of forms and official stamps laid out across the counter. Evelyn's hand lifted a single sheet, pointing precisely to the clause in question, the corner of the paper catching the sunlight as if highlighting her words for the entire room. "I understand it perfectly," she responded, not raising her voice, but each word dropping with deliberate clarity. "And following it as you suggest would cause errors in compliance that could affect multiple accounts." The air was taut, a mixture of curiosity and tension pressing down on the quiet hum of the lobby's air conditioning. Patrons leaned slightly forward from their places in line, their curiosity outweighing their hesitation. Mark straightened, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face, and glanced at the two junior clerks at the end of the counter, who now avoided his eyes, each acutely aware that the calm, precise authority of this elderly woman was unraveling his assumed control. Just then, the double doors at the entrance swung open with a soft push, and Vincent Carter stepped into the lobby, the late morning sunlight catching the edges of his tailored navy coat, casting a subtle glow on the polished floor. His presence immediately altered the energy in the room. Whispers hushed as he surveyed the scene, his gaze sharp, assessing the tension, noting every twitch, every hesitation, every subtle reaction. Vincent's eyes landed on Evelyn, standing firm, the slight crease in her forehead belying the intensity of her focus, and he smiled faintly, a silent acknowledgement of her composure under pressure. "Everything all right here?" His voice carried across the counter, calm yet impossible to ignore, and the room shifted as Mark Reynolds stumbled slightly over his words, caught between asserting authority and acknowledging the silent command that Vincent's presence implied. Evelyn's lips pressed together briefly, then relaxed, her stance unwavering. The folder still held firmly against her chest, and the lobby seemed to inhale collectively, anticipation threading through the space like an electric current. Vincent moved closer, not rushing, his steps measured, drawing attention without demanding it, and for a moment the chatter of other customers became a background murmur, a soft tide beneath the gravity of this encounter. Mark glanced at him, then back at Evelyn, the color draining slightly from his face, realizing in that instant that the hierarchy he assumed had been subtly but irrevocably disrupted. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, a quiet, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging an unspoken partnership in understanding the rules of integrity and respect that had just been reaffirmed. The hum of the lobby's ventilation was the only sound that persisted, almost magnifying the anticipation, the room's collective heartbeat seemingly aligned with the poised calm of Evelyn Johnson and the attentive presence of Vincent Carter, leaving everyone present suspended on the cusp of revelation. Curiosity burning brightly and questions hanging in the air as the story was far from over and the true resolution still waited just beyond the next moments. The lobby remained tense, every small movement amplified in the silent watch of the patrons lining the counters. Evelyn Johnson adjusted the grip on her folder, the soft creases of paper brushing together, a quiet rhythm echoing in the stillness. Vincent Carter took a deliberate step closer to the counter, the polished leather of his shoes squeaking faintly against the marble floor, drawing the gaze of everyone in the room. He did not speak immediately, allowing the tension to settle like a charged current, and in that moment the power dynamics in the bank shifted subtly, imperceptibly, but irrevocably. Mark Reynolds shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple, his hands flexing over the polished counter as he weighed the implications of the situation. Evelyn's eyes flicked briefly to the security cameras mounted high on the walls, the reflective glass catching the sunlight and scattering it into soft rays across the lobby, and she allowed herself a slow, measured inhale, feeling the steady beat of her own heart synchronize with the collective attention focused upon her. Vincent's gaze moved between Evelyn and the stack of documents in front of her, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, a recognition of competence and integrity that contrasted sharply with the smug authority Mark had attempted to assert moments earlier. The bank customers, some clutching forms and pens, others holding their wallets, leaned forward ever so slightly, drawn by a magnetic tension that held the air taut, the smell of polished wood and fresh paper mingling with the subtle scent of sunlight streaming through the glass doors. Mark cleared his throat, his voice carrying just above the hum of the air conditioning. These forms require verification, Miss Johnson. It is not the usual procedure for someone with your experience level. Evelyn tilted her head, the corners of her mouth lifting in a faint, confident smile as she met his gaze directly. I am aware of the procedures, Mr. Reynolds. I have reviewed the regulations and the documentation thoroughly. Following the method you insist upon would create errors that could affect multiple clients and accounts. Her voice was calm, even, but it held an undeniable authority that resonated through the lobby, drawing murmurs from bystanders who had begun to recognize the quiet power she held. Vincent Carter stepped a little closer, his hand lightly brushing the edge of the counter without reaching for any papers, signaling both presence and restraint, allowing the room to register his arrival fully before making any move. The slight shift in perspective, the addition of his commanding presence, caused the other clerks and patrons to instinctively straighten, their postures adjusting to the subtle but undeniable shift in influence. Mark's eyes flicked to the side, meeting those of a junior teller who nodded slightly, the acknowledgement of an unspoken truth passing silently between them. Evelyn's hands moved with quiet precision, arranging the documents neatly, tapping one corner to indicate a section that required correction, her movements deliberate and practiced, commanding attention without force or aggression. Vincent's lips curved slightly, a gesture unnoticed by all but Evelyn, an affirmation of the careful balance she maintained, the silent understanding of competence and calm under scrutiny. The lobby felt like it held its breath collectively, the distant whir of the ventilation system filling the spaces between unspoken words, the subtle reflection of light off the marble floor creating small, transient patterns that shifted as Vincent's shadow moved closer, lending weight and gravitas to the situation. Mark's expression tightened, the earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty, and he glanced quickly toward the bank manager at the far end of the counter, whose raised eyebrows betrayed the acknowledgement of an imbalance in authority that could no longer be ignored. Evelyn maintained her composure, allowing the gentle sway of her body and the controlled movement of her hands to convey calm determination, the unspoken message clear. Knowledge, patience, and integrity held more power here than loud words or assumed superiority. Patrons in line exchanged subtle looks, some whispering softly to their companions, a ripple of curiosity and awe spreading quietly but perceptibly across the bank as the drama of the encounter unfolded without a single raised voice or overt confrontation. The faint click of a pen being set down echoed softly, drawing attention to the precise moment when Evelyn tapped her finger lightly on a critical section of the paperwork, signaling not challenge but correction, her authority established by clarity and competence. Vincent's eyes followed the movement, a silent nod of approval acknowledging the deft handling of a delicate situation, the invisible current of respect passing between them and registering in the collective consciousness of everyone present. The room remained still for several seconds longer, anticipation and tension coiling like a spring ready to release. The subtle interplay of authority, competence, and patience holding the attention of all in the lobby, setting the stage for the inevitable revelation that would follow. Mark Reynolds' fingers hovered uncertainly over the keyboard as Vincent Carter's gaze held the space between them, unyielding and calm, and Evelyn Johnson stood her ground with quiet precision, her eyes scanning the forms again, noting subtle errors that others had overlooked for years, the soft shuffle of paper punctuating the tension in the room. The air seemed heavier now, each breath measured, each slight movement amplified, as if the lobby itself was leaning in, waiting for the unfolding of events to reach its inevitable tipping point. Customers shifted on their feet, adjusting their coats, gripping their bags, their curiosity threading through every silent pause. Vincent's hand rested lightly on the edge of the counter, not reaching for the documents but commanding presence, and the subtle creak of his shoes against the polished marble echoed softly across the quieted space. Evelyn lifted a finger to point at a misaligned signature line, the sunlight from the tall windows catching the paper at just the right angle to highlight her gesture, drawing the attention of everyone in the lobby without a word. Mark's jaw tightened, the confidence that had carried him through countless mornings of procedural routine now faltering under the weight of observation and integrity that Evelyn exuded effortlessly. Vincent's eyes shifted subtly to the security camera mounted near the ceiling, noting its angle, the reflection of the sun on the lens, then back to Evelyn, silently affirming her command of the situation. A slight murmur moved through the crowd as they realized the teller's authority was being questioned, not by confrontation, but by clarity, composure, and knowledge. Evelyn's hands moved with deliberate grace, tapping the relevant sections, arranging the forms into neat stacks, her movements calm, methodical, a visual demonstration of control and competence. Vincent stepped closer, his coat brushing lightly against the marble floor, and the subtle movement seemed to draw the room further into stillness, a gravitational pull around his presence that lent weight to every statement Evelyn made. Mark glanced at the bank manager, whose lifted eyebrows and subtle nods signaled an unspoken acknowledgement of the shifting balance, the realization that the tide had turned and authority could no longer be assumed by position alone. The junior clerks at the far end of the counter exchanged glances, their posture straightening, their pens poised as they witnessed the quiet exchange of power, knowledge, and respect. Evelyn's eyes met Vincent's, a silent conversation passing between them, a recognition of trust, acknowledgement, and shared understanding that contrasted sharply with Mark's sputtering attempts at asserting control. The hum of the ventilation system punctuated the pauses, the soft click of a pen hitting the counter, the muted shuffle of papers, and the quiet intake of breath from bystanders, all layering into a symphony of anticipation. The sunlight shifted slightly as the late morning continued, highlighting the subtle lines of concentration on Evelyn's face, the calm intensity in her gaze, the precise movements of her hands, and the poised patience that held the room suspended in balance. Vincent's voice broke the silence softly, asking for clarifications on minor procedural details, not as a challenge but as a means to illuminate the truth, each question casting a spotlight on the discrepancies that Evelyn had identified, drawing the attention of the staff and customers alike without raising volume or tone. The gentle shuffle of papers, the rustle of clothing as customers leaned in slightly, the reflective gleam on the polished counters all contributed to a sense of quiet drama, the moment stretching as if time itself had slowed to accommodate the interplay of authority, knowledge, and integrity. Evelyn maintained her composure, a subtle exhale, a shift in stance, each movement deliberate, measured, and communicative without a single raised voice, each gesture reinforcing her competence and the correctness of her observations. Mark's eyes darted briefly to Vincent, uncertainty creeping in as he realized that the presence of someone observant, knowledgeable, and poised could not be dismissed, and the murmurs in the room, gentle but perceptible, affirmed the impact of Evelyn's quiet strength, leaving all present suspended on the edge of resolution, waiting to see how the next exchange would define the balance of respect and authority in the bank lobby. The subtle tension in the bank shifted again as Vincent Carter leaned slightly forward, his eyes scanning the documents on the counter, while maintaining a steady gaze on Mark Reynolds, whose confident posture now betrayed uncertainty, each small twitch of his fingers betraying the internal reckoning that was unfolding silently within him. Evelyn Johnson remained composed, her hands lightly brushing the papers as if orchestrating a delicate balance, the soft rustle of paper accompanying the unspoken dialogue between authority, experience, and quiet competence. The sunlight streaming through the high windows created shifting patterns on the marble floor, reflecting in brief glimmers on the edges of the counter, highlighting the meticulous alignment of the forms Evelyn had arranged, the subtle shadows lending weight to her calm, deliberate actions. Patrons who had been watching from the sidelines exchanged glances, their collective awareness sharpening as they sensed the shift, a quiet understanding that the established order was being challenged not with loud words, but with knowledge, poise, and integrity. Mark's brow furrowed as he attempted to interject, but Vincent's calm presence, the deliberate pause in his step, and the slight lift of his hand caused him to hesitate, the weight of observation pressing down, making every decision measured and cautious. Evelyn tapped a precise corner of a document to indicate a necessary correction, her gesture small but deliberate, each movement amplifying the authority she carried through competence rather than volume. Vincent's gaze followed the motion, a subtle nod acknowledging her assessment, and the room collectively absorbed the quiet command, the silence punctuated only by the distant hum of the air conditioning and the gentle scuff of shoes against the marble. Mark shifted slightly, glancing toward the bank manager, whose discreet nod suggested recognition of the integrity and correctness of Evelyn's intervention, the manager's subtle movements conveying approval without words, reinforcing the silent understanding that had formed among those present. The junior clerks, previously uncertain and hesitant, now straightened in their seats, pens poised, papers aligned, all eyes on Evelyn and Vincent, absorbing the lesson of composed authority and the impact of knowledge executed with precision. Evelyn's voice, calm but unwavering, outlined the procedural corrections, the soft syllables carrying clearly through the hushed lobby, each point logically and succinctly presented, leaving no room for misinterpretation and drawing subtle, approving glances from the attentive patrons around them. Vincent stepped slightly closer, his presence commanding yet non-intrusive, allowing the focus to remain on Evelyn's expertise while lending undeniable weight to her words, the slight shift in his stance signaling affirmation without interrupting the flow of her explanation. The murmurs that had begun to stir among the bystanders softened into attentive silence, the lobby now fully engaged, each subtle detail, the alignment of papers, the crease of a corner, the reflective shine of the marble, becoming part of the unfolding narrative of competence meeting scrutiny. Evelyn maintained her poise, her hands adjusting a document here, tapping a section there, all movements deliberate, precise, and communicative, creating a visual rhythm that underscored the seriousness and clarity of her intervention. Vincent's eyes met hers briefly, a shared acknowledgement of trust and mutual respect passing silently between them, reinforcing the balance of authority achieved through competence rather than position, and the patrons felt the weight of that silent lesson, the tension giving way to an appreciation of measured skill and integrity. Mark, realizing the inevitability of the correction and the undeniable impact of Evelyn's calm expertise supported by Vincent's presence, exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing imperceptibly as he prepared to follow the guidance outlined by Evelyn, the realization settling that competence and clarity carried more influence in this moment than hierarchy or assumed authority. The lobby remained quiet, the interplay of light and shadow, subtle movements and focused gazes, the distant hum of the building, all contributing to a cinematic stillness that captured the unfolding transformation of power, patience, and understanding in a space that had moments ago been charged with tension, leaving all present suspended in anticipation of the resolution yet to come. The tension in the bank subtly shifted as Vincent Carter took another step closer, his polished shoes clicking softly on the marble floor, each sound amplified in the quiet room like a metronome counting the unspoken tempo of authority. Evelyn Johnson adjusted her grip on the folder once more, the edges of the papers crisp beneath her fingers, a tactile affirmation of the careful preparation that had brought her to this moment. She allowed a slow, controlled breath to pass, the faint exhale carrying the weight of calm determination, and she met Mark Reynolds' gaze with unwavering steadiness, the clarity of her eyes conveying knowledge, experience, and a quiet insistence on integrity. Around them, the bank's customers leaned forward just slightly, the collective anticipation palpable, their whispered conversations muted as the drama unfolded. Vincent's presence created a gravitational pull that drew every line of sight toward the counter, his posture poised and deliberate, a steadying force that accentuated the composure and authority Evelyn exuded without raising her voice. Mark's fingers hovered uncertainly above the keyboard and forms, the confident motions he had executed earlier now replaced by a hesitant stillness, his internal calculations racing as he attempted to reconcile the challenge to his authority with the silent, undeniable correctness of Evelyn's actions. Evelyn tapped a section of a document with precision, her gesture subtle yet commanding, drawing attention without aggression, the faint shimmer of sunlight reflecting off the edge of the paper catching the eye of those in line and emphasizing the gravity of her intervention. The soft hum of the ventilation system blended with the subtle rustle of paper, the faint creak of floorboards, and the quiet shuffle of shoes as bystanders shifted their weight, layering ambient sound into a backdrop that heightened the suspense, accentuating the poised exchange occurring at the counter. Vincent's hand rested lightly near the corner of the counter, not touching the documents but subtly guiding the space, his calm demeanor amplifying the authority that came from knowledge and presence rather than volume or command, signaling to Mark that any further challenge would be met with observation and precision rather than confrontation. Evelyn's voice, measured and deliberate, traced through the procedural corrections with clarity, each syllable ringing in the still air, highlighting discrepancies and guiding the resolution, drawing careful attention from both the staff and the watching patrons. The subtle shift in power was visible in the posture of those around the counter. Junior clerks straightened, pens poised, their eyes following Evelyn's precise movements, absorbing the lesson of competence, patience, and integrity. The bank manager, discreetly observing from a distance, gave the slightest nod, the gesture unspoken yet resonating with approval and recognition of Evelyn's careful handling of the situation. The sunlight angled through the tall windows, glinting off polished surfaces, accentuating the calm focus on Evelyn's face, the slight tilt of her head as she considered the next step, and the smooth rhythm of her hands as she arranged and tapped papers, creating a visual cadence that matched the silent, calculated tension of the moment. Vincent's gaze met hers briefly, an acknowledgement of shared understanding and mutual trust passing silently, reinforcing the balance of authority grounded in knowledge and preparation rather than hierarchical position. Customers and staff alike remained attentive, the quiet intensity of the moment drawing their focus, every small gesture. Paper shuffled, finger tapped, eyes lifted, contributing to the dramatic interplay of competence, patience, and respect that defined the scene. Mark's expression softened as he exhaled slowly, the realization settling that the situation could no longer be navigated through assumed authority alone, that the quiet force of knowledge and integrity possessed by Evelyn, reinforced by Vincent's presence, carried more weight than procedure unchecked by understanding. The ambient sounds of the lobby, air circulation, soft footsteps, distant murmurs, merged seamlessly with the visual tension, creating a cinematic tableau in which every participant's attention was drawn. Every movement magnified, and every subtle decision weighted with consequence, leaving the room suspended in a careful balance of anticipation and acknowledgement as the resolution continued to build toward its inevitable conclusion. The atmosphere in the bank shifted again as Vincent Carter stepped slightly to the side, allowing Evelyn Johnson to take the lead, her presence commanding attention without the need for raised voices or hurried motions. The soft rustle of paper echoed in the marble lobby as she lifted a document and pointed precisely to a paragraph that required correction, her fingers steady, her movements deliberate, each tap of the paper drawing subtle glances from onlookers who now realized the depth of her understanding. Mark Reynolds cleared his throat, hesitant, eyes darting between Vincent and Evelyn, his earlier confidence replaced with measured caution, the weight of observation pressing down with an almost tangible gravity. Vincent's gaze followed Evelyn's hands as they arranged the forms, his subtle nod reinforcing the validity of her assessments, while the sunlight streaming through the tall windows caught on the edges of the documents, reflecting soft streaks across the polished floor, emphasizing the meticulous care she took in every detail. Patrons in line leaned slightly forward, their curiosity piqued, watching the precise exchange unfold, noticing the careful rhythm of Evelyn's adjustments and the calm, attentive response of Vincent, each motion and glance communicating authority, respect, and control. Evelyn's voice, clear and steady, traced the corrections in detail, outlining procedural adjustments with a soft, deliberate cadence that allowed each word to resonate in the hushed lobby, drawing attention not with force, but through clarity and knowledge. The air seemed charged with anticipation as Mark's fingers hovered, reluctant to act, while the junior clerks straightened in their seats, pens poised, absorbing the lesson of composure and expertise before them. Vincent's presence added weight without intruding, his slight lean and calm observation reinforcing Evelyn's authority and subtly guiding the attention of the room toward the truth of the documentation. Evelyn's eyes met Vincent's briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, reinforcing mutual respect and understanding, a quiet partnership that communicated competence and confidence to all present. The hum of the ventilation system and the faint shuffle of shoes on the marble created a steady backdrop, allowing the visual and verbal cues to dominate the scene, every movement measured, every gesture purposeful, highlighting the contrast between calm authority and previously assumed control. The sunlight shifted with the progression of the late morning, tracing thin lines across the counter, emphasizing the meticulous alignment of papers and the careful attention Evelyn paid to each detail, the subtle gleam reinforcing the gravity of her quiet command. Mark's jaw tightened as he realized the situation required acknowledgement rather than assertion, the gentle but firm guidance of Evelyn, reinforced by Vincent's presence, creating a moment where patience, integrity, and expertise carried undeniable authority. Patrons whispered softly among themselves, a quiet hum of realization threading through the lobby as the slow unraveling of assumed dominance became apparent. The subtle choreography of gestures, glances, and precise actions holding the room in collective attention. Evelyn shifted slightly, aligning the final stack of forms, tapping a corner for emphasis, her movements deliberate, confident, and precise, each subtle action drawing the gaze of bystanders while reinforcing the correctness of her interventions. Vincent's stance remained supportive but unobtrusive, the light in his eyes reflecting recognition and approval, the shared understanding between them forming a silent core of authority and respect that resonated outward, influencing the posture and attentiveness of everyone present. The quiet tension held for several breaths, the room suspended in anticipation, the interplay of knowledge, patience, and presence creating a cinematic tableau, every subtle cue magnified, every gesture loaded with meaning, leaving all present aware that the balance of authority had shifted decisively, yet quietly, awaiting the next decisive moment that would fully resolve the encounter. Mark Reynolds' hesitation stretched into several long, measured seconds as he studied Evelyn Johnson's poised form, the way her fingers lightly tapped a corner of the folder and the subtle shift in her stance that spoke of quiet confidence rather than aggression. Vincent Carter's presence remained steady at her side, his gaze sweeping the room with calm authority, and the soft click of his shoes on the marble floor punctuated the unspoken message that the situation was under control, the balance of attention subtly realigned in favor of truth and competence. Customers in line leaned forward, eyes widening slightly as they absorbed the careful choreography of gestures, glances, and measured speech, each detail magnified by the hushed silence that enveloped the lobby. Evelyn lifted the folder and placed it gently on the counter, sliding the documents forward with precision so that every relevant page was perfectly aligned, the sunlight catching the edges, and highlighting the care she took in presenting her points. Mark's lips pressed into a thin line, uncertainty creeping into his posture as he watched the sequence, realizing that his assumed dominance could no longer overshadow methodical accuracy and integrity. Vincent's subtle nod, the brief but deliberate tilt of his head, seemed to affirm Evelyn's authority without uttering a single word, and the room collectively sensed the quiet power of observation and correctness at work. Evelyn began to explain the procedural adjustments once more, her voice calm and deliberate, each word enunciated clearly, resonating in the still lobby, guiding attention to the key points and corrections with effortless control, demonstrating a command of the material that left no room for misunderstanding. The faint hum of the ventilation system and the soft shuffle of shoes on marble were the only sounds, providing a rhythmic backdrop that contrasted with the weight of attentive observation in the room. Junior clerks straightened in their seats, pens poised, eyes tracking each movement, absorbing lessons in patience, precision, and the quiet assertion of competence. Patrons who had initially only glanced curiously now leaned in slightly, catching the subtle changes in posture and expression that signaled the full import of the encounter, witnessing authority realized through knowledge rather than assumption. Mark's eyes flicked toward Vincent, whose calm, observant presence reinforced the correctness of Evelyn's actions, and he exhaled slowly, shoulders easing slightly as the acknowledgement of mistake settled in. Evelyn's hands moved with smooth, deliberate motions, tapping corners, arranging stacks, and pointing to critical lines, each gesture measured and meaningful, commanding attention while conveying no threat, only clarity and correctness. Vincent adjusted his stance, stepping lightly to reinforce the space without overshadowing Evelyn, and the room responded almost imperceptibly to this equilibrium, a collective recognition of rightful influence in the balance of the moment. The late morning sunlight shifted across the lobby, tracing patterns on the polished marble, illuminating the careful alignment of documents and the deliberate poise of Evelyn, accentuating the visual rhythm that mirrored the unfolding resolution of the conflict. Customers exchanged subtle, amazed glances, quietly noting the contrast between quiet authority and previously assumed control, the interplay of patience, knowledge, and integrity holding the space in suspended anticipation. Evelyn's gaze swept the room once more, meeting Vincent's briefly, the silent acknowledgement of mutual respect and shared understanding fortifying the presence of truth over position. Mark, finally lowering his hands, gave a small, reluctant nod, signaling recognition of Evelyn's correct handling of the situation, the shift in dynamics complete yet understated, leaving the lobby with a palpable sense of order restored through measured, informed action. The hum of the environment, the soft light on polished surfaces, and the careful movements of every participant created a cinematic tableau, the unfolding of competence and patience resonating with quiet intensity, leaving all present attentive, reflective, and poised for what the next moments might reveal. The soft hum of the air conditioning filled the bank as Evelyn Johnson shifted her weight slightly, maintaining a composed stance as she surveyed the attentive room, her eyes briefly flicking to each patron, taking in their silent reactions and gauging the impact of her steady, measured presence. Vincent Carter remained close, his posture relaxed yet deliberate, a silent support that reinforced the authority she carried without a single raised voice, the subtle tilt of his head and the calm assurance in his gaze amplifying the weight of the moment. Evelyn gently tapped a corner of a critical form, the sunlight catching the edge of the paper and scattering light across the polished marble floor, drawing attention without overt display, each movement precise, calculated, and purposeful. Mark Reynolds exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing as he finally registered the correctness of Evelyn's observations, the once rigid confidence now replaced with contemplative uncertainty, his eyes darting briefly to the bank manager whose subtle nods signaled quiet acknowledgement of the shift in dynamics. Customers leaned forward slightly, their collective awareness heightened, noting the deliberate rhythm of Evelyn's hands, the alignment of documents, and the calm, unhurried cadence of her voice as she traced corrections and procedural details, each word carrying clarity and authority that could not be dismissed. Vincent's presence added a layer of quiet gravity, his footsteps soft against the marble, his eyes scanning the room with attentive precision, reinforcing the sense of order and correctness without interrupting the delicate flow Evelyn maintained. The rustle of paper, the faint echo of pen tapping, and the almost imperceptible shift of chairs and bodies contributed to a soundtrack of anticipation, subtle but compelling, underscoring the gravity of the exchange at the counter. Evelyn's movements remained deliberate, arranging the forms with care, pointing to critical sections with a gentle tap, her gestures communicating assurance and methodical attention to detail, the rhythm of her hands matched by the subtle sway of her posture, creating a visual cadence that resonated throughout the lobby. Patrons whispered softly among themselves, their voices hushed but curious, eyes tracking each motion, drawn into the interplay of authority, competence, and quiet confidence that had replaced the prior tension with measured attention. Mark's jaw flexed subtly as he realized the extent to which the balance of influence had shifted, the silent lesson in integrity and thoroughness setting a new precedent, and he allowed a brief nod, signaling recognition of Evelyn's skill and the undeniable correctness of her actions. Vincent observed all this with calm assurance, his gaze briefly meeting Evelyn's in a shared acknowledgement of clarity and mutual understanding, a silent communication that reinforced the equilibrium of the moment and the quiet respect it inspired. The sunlight continued to shift across the lobby, highlighting the precise alignment of papers and the meticulous care in Evelyn's handling of the documents. Every subtle gesture accentuated by the changing reflections, the polished surfaces capturing fragments of movement and light that seemed almost choreographed. Evelyn exhaled lightly, a subtle motion that released tension without disrupting the focus of the room, her gaze sweeping the bank from counter to line to doorway, ensuring every observer registered the careful orchestration of knowledge, patience, and authority she embodied. The lobby felt suspended, every small sound, the creak of shoes, the faint shuffle of a coat, the click of a pen, heightened in significance as the interplay of observation, competence, and silent influence continued, leaving the entire space poised in attentive anticipation of the next steps in the unfolding resolution. Mark finally relaxed, his hands lowering slightly, the recognition of correct procedure and the quiet demonstration of authority settling into an understated acknowledgement, while patrons shifted, absorbing the subtle power of observation and careful action that had reshaped the energy of the room, leaving a lingering impression of calm, competence, and integrity. The room seemed to hold its breath as Evelyn Johnson straightened, a subtle shift of weight grounding her stance, her eyes scanning the line of patrons and the counter, ensuring every movement was precise, deliberate, and visible. Vincent Carter stood slightly behind her, calm and composed, his presence a stabilizing force that magnified the quiet authority Evelyn carried without a single raised voice. Mark Reynolds' hands hovered just above the counter, a fleeting glance at the bank manager betraying his uncertainty, the earlier confidence now tempered by the undeniable clarity of Evelyn's actions. Evelyn's fingers moved carefully across the documents, aligning the pages, tapping corners to highlight procedural corrections, each motion drawing subtle attention. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows glinting off the polished marble and reflecting softly on the edges of the forms, creating a cinematic interplay of light and focus. The air was taut with anticipation, the soft rustle of papers, the faint shuffle of shoes, and the whisper of air conditioning hums composing a backdrop for the unfolding scene, the quiet tension holding every observer in careful attention. Evelyn's voice, measured and calm, traced through the procedural details with clarity, her tone steady and deliberate, drawing focus to necessary corrections while maintaining poise and authority, commanding respect through knowledge rather than volume. Vincent's gaze followed each movement with careful consideration, a nod here, a subtle glance there, reinforcing the correctness and impact of Evelyn's precision, amplifying her presence without overshadowing her actions. Patrons leaned in slightly, their curiosity and attention fully engaged, observing the meticulous adjustments, the soft taps of paper, and the calm assurance that radiated from Evelyn, the silent lesson in patience, competence, and measured authority unfolding before them. Mark's posture relaxed slowly, his shoulders easing as he acknowledged, if only internally, the quiet mastery Evelyn exhibited, the realization that authority derived from expertise and calm command outweighed assumed control. Junior clerks straightened, pens poised, eyes tracking every gesture, internalizing the rhythm of deliberate action, the subtle command of attention achieved through precision and clarity, each movement reinforcing lessons in responsibility and respect. The sunlight shifted gradually, highlighting the alignment of documents, the careful placement of hands, and the calm demeanor of Evelyn, accentuating the visual cadence and creating reflections that traced along the polished surfaces, emphasizing the subtle choreography of competence in action. Vincent stepped lightly, his movements deliberate, reinforcing space and presence without disruption, the ambient hum of the lobby accentuating the quiet intensity of the unfolding scene. Evelyn's gaze met Vincent's briefly, an unspoken acknowledgement of trust and mutual understanding passing between them, reinforcing authority grounded in preparation, knowledge, and quiet confidence. Customers and staff alike remained attentive, the soft murmur of observation giving way to a focused silence as the momentum of the resolution built, each subtle gesture, glance, and motion contributing to the careful orchestration of authority and respect. Mark's jaw flexed as he realized that the resolution required acknowledgement rather than assertion, his previous certainty tempered by the clarity and calm exhibited by Evelyn, and he allowed a brief nod to pass, signaling recognition of her expertise and the subtle shift in power. The lobby's details, the glint of sunlight on marble, the soft shuffle of feet, the precise alignment of papers, and the measured cadence of Evelyn's movements, wove together into a cinematic tableau of patience, authority, and meticulous competence, leaving the room suspended in an attentive, anticipatory state as the next pivotal moments approached. Every observer caught in the quiet intensity of the unfolding narrative. The subtle rhythm of the bank lobby shifted as Vincent Carter's attention sharpened, his gaze landing on a minor discrepancy in one of the forms Evelyn Johnson had pointed out earlier, and with a quiet, deliberate step, he moved closer, his polished shoes whispering against the marble floor, commanding notice without interrupting the measured flow of the encounter. Evelyn's eyes met his for a brief second, a flicker of acknowledgement passing silently, signaling trust and coordination as she tapped a precise section of the document to emphasize the necessary correction. Mark Reynolds exhaled slowly, a tension in his shoulders easing as he recognized the accuracy of Evelyn's intervention, his previous assertiveness now tempered by the combined weight of expertise and calm presence. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows highlighted the alignment of papers on the counter, casting subtle reflections that danced across the polished marble, drawing the attention of patrons who leaned slightly forward, their curiosity sharpened, watching each deliberate movement with quiet anticipation. Evelyn adjusted the stack of documents, her fingers brushing lightly against the edges, maintaining a steady rhythm that conveyed control, clarity, and professionalism without a single raised voice, the soft shuffle of paper punctuating the calm authority she held. Vincent's presence remained a stabilizing force, his posture relaxed yet purposeful, a subtle reinforcement of Evelyn's competence and the correctness of her observations, allowing the room to register a shift in authority that needed no words to define. Patrons watched intently, whispers fading into attentive silence as the careful choreography of gestures, glances, and spoken words unfolded, demonstrating the power of knowledge, preparation, and calm poise over assumed dominance. Mark's fingers hovered uncertainly over the counter, the habitual confidence replaced by measured restraint, as he followed Evelyn's precise guidance and Vincent's quiet reinforcement, acknowledging that the balance of influence had shifted without disruption or confrontation. Evelyn's voice traced the procedural clarifications with calm certainty, each syllable measured, deliberate, and clear, resonating through the lobby, drawing attention not through volume, but through unmistakable authority and accuracy. The hum of the ventilation system, the gentle shuffle of feet, and the faint rustle of paper provided a subtle backdrop, amplifying the intensity of observation and the weight of the unfolding resolution. Junior clerks straightened in their seats, pens poised, eyes tracking every detail, absorbing the demonstration of patience, competence, and careful precision, the silent lesson evident in every deliberate gesture Evelyn made. Vincent adjusted his stance slightly, allowing his presence to reinforce the authority already established, the soft shift of weight conveying support without overshadowing Evelyn's command. The sunlight continued its slow movement across the lobby, illuminating the meticulous arrangement of forms, the gentle tap of Evelyn's fingers, and the subtle reflections on the marble that accentuated the visual cadence of the scene, heightening the cinematic tension. Patrons and staff alike observed the unfolding exchange with rapt attention, noting the contrast between measured competence and previously assumed control, absorbing the quiet impact of integrity and skill as they played out across the counter. Evelyn's hands moved with precision, pointing, tapping, and adjusting, each motion deliberate and meaningful, reinforcing the correctness of her observations and the authority inherent in clarity and preparation. Vincent's eyes met hers briefly, a silent affirmation passing between them, reinforcing shared understanding, trust, and the measured influence they held together, a calm, yet undeniable command over the room's focus. The subtle orchestration of movement, observation, and controlled speech kept the bank lobby suspended in quiet anticipation, every person present keenly aware of the shift in dynamics, waiting for the next decisive moment that would fully resolve the encounter and cement the recognition of competence, preparation, and integrity over assumed hierarchy. Mark Reynolds leaned back slightly, the weight of realization settling heavily on his shoulders as he traced the meticulous alignment of documents and the deliberate cadence of Evelyn Johnson's movements, the quiet authority she commanded pressing against the remnants of his assumed dominance. His eyes flicked to Vincent Carter, whose calm, watchful presence silently reinforced the correctness of Evelyn's every action, and the subtle nod Vincent offered carried a gravitas that resonated through the lobby without a single raised voice. Evelyn adjusted the corner of a page, tapping lightly to draw attention to a minor discrepancy, and the sunlight streaming through the high windows caught the edge of the paper, scattering thin lines across the marble floor, illuminating the careful choreography of hands, eyes, and posture that defined her authority in the moment. Patrons in line leaned in slightly, their curiosity sharpened, observing the interplay of competence and observation, their whispered murmurs fading into attentive silence as they absorbed the lesson unfolding before them. Mark exhaled slowly, a tension easing from his jaw and shoulders, the acknowledgement of error evident though unspoken, and he shifted his stance subtly, recognizing that authority rooted in precision and integrity far outweighed assumed control. Vincent's gaze moved from Evelyn to the documents and back again, a subtle affirmation of her approach, the presence of quiet observation heightening the perception of careful correctness in every motion. Evelyn's voice traced procedural details with calm, deliberate clarity, each word falling in measured cadence, resonating across the lobby, guiding attention without overt insistence, allowing knowledge and skill to command focus and respect naturally. The soft hum of ventilation and the gentle shuffle of shoes on polished marble underscored the moment, each sound amplified in the hushed attention of the room, emphasizing the importance of patience, precision, and quiet authority. Junior clerks straightened in their chairs, pens poised, eyes following Evelyn's gestures, absorbing a lesson in competence, attentiveness, and careful control of movement and tone, the demonstration leaving an indelible impression of how clarity and preparation establish command. Sunlight shifted gradually across the counter, illuminating the precise angles of paper, the careful gestures of Evelyn's hands, and the subtle reflection on polished surfaces, highlighting the visual rhythm that mirrored the quiet unfolding of influence and respect. Patrons and staff observed in rapt attention, the subtle choreography of pointing, tapping, and alignment creating a tableau of control and competence that contrasted sharply with prior assumptions of authority. Evelyn's gaze swept the room briefly, connecting with Vincent in a silent exchange of trust and affirmation, the acknowledgement reinforcing the shared understanding of correctness, preparation, and mutual respect that defined the dynamics of the encounter. Mark's expression softened further as he allowed himself to register the weight of Evelyn's methodical approach, the realization sinking that patience, integrity, and knowledge carried more power than position alone, and a subtle nod passed, quiet and deliberate, signaling recognition. The ambient sounds of the lobby, the faint shuffle of movement, the soft echo of paper being adjusted, the gentle hum of air circulation, intertwined with the visual precision of Evelyn's movements, reinforcing the gravity of the moment. Every gesture, glance, and subtle motion contributed to a cinematic sense of measured authority, leaving all present suspended in focused anticipation, the balance of respect, competence, and quiet power fully acknowledged yet waiting to resolve completely. Evelyn adjusted the final stack of forms, her hands moving with deliberate precision, each tap, lift, and placement conveying authority and accuracy without overt assertion, and the room seemed to breathe with the rhythm she established, every observer conscious of the transition from assumed dominance to validated expertise. Vincent's presence continued to amplify the calm authority, his measured stance and subtle acknowledgement reinforcing the correctness of Evelyn's actions, guiding the room's focus and consolidating the new balance of influence. The sunlight continued to play across the lobby, casting reflections and shadows that accentuated the visual cadence of precise actions, deliberate gestures, and attentive observation, leaving the patrons, clerks, and staff aligned in quiet understanding of the meticulous and thoughtful execution of authority, integrity, and competence. Mark exhaled again, a slow, measured release, as the room absorbed the weight of the exchange, every small motion, glance, and shift of posture underscoring the lesson of controlled expertise prevailing over assumed power, leaving all present poised on the edge of final acknowledgement and resolution, anticipating the moment when full recognition would be given to the careful, patient, and authoritative actions that had redefined the dynamic of the space. The subtle weight in the bank shifted as Evelyn Johnson, with deliberate calm, began to gather the final documents into a neat stack, her fingers moving with practiced precision that spoke of years of careful attention and expertise. Vincent Carter watched closely, his presence steady and unobtrusive, his eyes tracing each motion, silently affirming the accuracy and integrity of her actions, creating an unspoken partnership that carried undeniable authority. Mark Reynolds remained frozen for a heartbeat longer, the tension in his shoulders slowly easing as he recognized the quiet correctness of Evelyn's approach, the prior assertiveness replaced by contemplative acknowledgement of competence that could not be ignored. Patrons leaned forward ever so slightly, their gazes following the subtle choreography of hands, papers, and eyes, observing a demonstration of calm, informed authority that left no room for doubt or dispute. The sunlight through the tall windows shifted gently across the marble floor, glinting off polished surfaces and casting soft, elongated reflections that highlighted the meticulous alignment of papers and the deliberate gestures Evelyn employed, creating a visual rhythm that complemented the serene cadence of her voice as she outlined the final adjustments. Vincent's subtle nod, the measured tilt of his head, reinforced the correctness of Evelyn's actions, his presence amplifying her authority without ever overtaking the scene, allowing the room to absorb the quiet but undeniable shift in influence. Evelyn's voice traced each point with careful clarity, each word deliberate and precise, resonating across the lobby and commanding attention not through volume, but through unassailable correctness and confidence. The hum of the air conditioning, the faint shuffle of shoes, and the soft rustle of paper provided a delicate backdrop, emphasizing the attentive focus of everyone present and the careful orchestration of competence in action. Junior clerks and nearby staff straightened instinctively, pens poised, eyes following every gesture, internalizing the lesson of patient authority, careful precision, and measured composure that Evelyn embodied in every movement. The lobby seemed suspended in time, every small sound, the tap of a finger on a paper, the shift of weight, the subtle intake of breath, magnifying the significance of the encounter and the growing recognition of integrity and expertise over assumed dominance. Mark exhaled slowly, shoulders relaxing, the acknowledgement of his previous misjudgment settling quietly, his posture reflecting the acceptance of Evelyn's competence and the careful balance of observation, preparation, and authority now firmly established. Evelyn's hands moved to align the last of the forms, each motion deliberate, precise, and communicative, reinforcing the lesson of accuracy, calm, and confidence, the soft glint of sunlight highlighting her meticulous care. Vincent's eyes met hers briefly, a silent affirmation of trust, understanding, and mutual respect passing between them, fortifying the authority of her actions in the perception of all present. Patrons watched in attentive silence, the quiet interplay of gestures, glances, and spoken clarity conveying lessons in integrity, competence, and measured influence, the subtle choreography creating a cinematic tableau of calm mastery. The ambient hum of the lobby, the gentle creak of chairs, and the reflective shine on polished marble combined to frame the scene, highlighting the delicate balance of observation, preparation, and quiet command. Every gesture, subtle adjustment, and focused glance reinforced the shift in dynamics, the room collectively absorbing the transition from assumed authority to demonstrated competence. Evelyn straightened once more, adjusting the last edges, a soft, deliberate exhale releasing the tension she had carried through the process, her gaze sweeping across the lobby in quiet assurance. Vincent's posture, calm and deliberate, supported without intrusion, allowing the recognition of correct procedure and thoughtful precision to settle fully, while Mark's stance conveyed the final acceptance of the competence and integrity he had observed. The sunlight continued to move across the marble, highlighting the precise angles of papers and the serene authority in Evelyn's actions, each subtle movement contributing to a harmonious, cinematic depiction of measured control, patience, and respect, leaving the entire lobby suspended in quiet anticipation as the moment of full acknowledgement and resolution reached its near culmination. Every observer conscious of the delicate, deliberate, and commanding balance of skill, integrity, and composed presence that had reshaped the energy of the room. The lobby fell into a hushed, reflective calm as Evelyn Johnson straightened one last time, her hands folding neatly over the final stack of documents, the soft rustle of paper barely audible against the smooth marble floors. Vincent Carter remained poised a step behind, his presence steady and assured, lending weight to her quiet authority without overshadowing her. The subtle nod of his head communicating a shared acknowledgement of the precision and integrity Evelyn had demonstrated throughout the encounter. Mark Reynolds exhaled fully, the tension leaving his shoulders, a slow, contemplative realization washing over him as he absorbed the meticulous attention to detail and deliberate calm that had guided Evelyn through the process. Patrons leaned back slightly, some exhaling softly, others exchanging subtle glances of admiration and surprise, the hush in the room reflecting a collective recognition of competence, patience, and quiet authority prevailing over assumed dominance. Sunlight from the tall windows shifted gently, casting a warm glow across the polished marble, catching the edges of the forms and highlighting the careful alignment and thoughtful gestures that had defined Evelyn's control of the moment. She allowed her gaze to sweep the room, eyes meeting those of the patrons briefly, acknowledging the attention and understanding that had been drawn to the exchange without a word, the calm in her posture reinforcing the silent lesson of integrity over ego. Vincent's eyes followed the sweep, his subtle shift of stance reinforcing the shared understanding, a silent reinforcement of the authority grounded in knowledge, preparation, and measured action, the room collectively absorbing the weight of his composed presence alongside hers. Mark's eyes flicked to the bank manager, whose slight tilt of the head and quiet expression conveyed an acknowledgement of resolution and correctness, a subtle gesture that signaled the acceptance of the shift in dynamics without disrupting the calm. The soft hum of the ventilation system, the faint shuffle of shoes, and the subtle movement of pens on paper combined to form a quiet soundtrack to the scene, emphasizing the serene intensity and careful orchestration of authority that had transformed the energy of the lobby. Evelyn's voice, calm and deliberate, carried the final clarifications with gentle clarity, each word deliberate, measured, and precise, reinforcing her guidance and ensuring comprehension without the need for raised tones or rushed instructions. The patrons, clerks, and staff observed intently, absorbing the subtleties of her gestures, the precision in her movements, and the quiet confidence that had reshaped the perception of competence and leadership in the room. The sunlight shifted gradually, glinting softly on polished surfaces, accentuating the careful alignment of the forms and the understated but undeniable assertion of calm authority through deliberate, precise action. Evelyn allowed herself a subtle exhale, a gentle acknowledgement of the resolution, her hands folding neatly over the completed paperwork, the rhythm of her motions conveying confidence, clarity, and thoughtful execution. Vincent's presence remained steady, his slight nod reinforcing the correctness and authority of her actions, a silent affirmation that enhanced the impact of her poise and precision on all those present. Mark, his posture now relaxed, allowed a small, tentative smile to pass, the acknowledgement of the lesson in patience, integrity, and measured action settling quietly without words, his previous assumption of control replaced by recognition of competence demonstrated through careful, deliberate action. The ambient sounds of the lobby, the shifting sunlight, and the reflective marble surfaces combined with the subtle orchestration of gestures, glances, and movement to create a cinematic tableau of composure, competence, and integrity, leaving the room in a state of attentive anticipation as the final acknowledgement of authority, skill, and calm mastery settled fully across the space. Every subtle shift in posture, every deliberate motion, and every attentive glance contributed to a silent symphony of recognition. The quiet assertion of integrity prevailing and leaving a lasting impression on every observer in the lobby, a testament to careful preparation, steady presence, and measured, thoughtful action that had redefined the moment with clarity and quiet power.